When I bought the ranch, I knew I was getting a little slice of peace. 15 acres of open land, some fencing, a small barn, and a long gravel driveway. Far enough from the city to breathe, but close enough to keep a normal job. What I didn't know was that I'd accidentally parked my dream home right next to a nightmare. Karen. At first, she seemed like just another curious neighbor. She waved when I was unloading boxes, walked her little white dog near the edge of my property, and once brought over a pie, which, looking back, felt more like an excuse to snoop than a welcome gift. She asked a lot of questions. What do you plan to do with all this land? Are you running a business? Did you get special permission from the HOA to build that shed? That last one caught me off guard. HOA? I said. I'm not in your HOA. I checked before buying. She gave a tight smile. Well, technically you're not, but this whole area follows the same standards. We like to keep things tidy around here. I shrugged it off at the time, thinking she was just being a bit nosy. But over the next few weeks, her visits became more frequent and more confrontational. One morning, I caught her on my land, holding a clipboard, jotting things down while pacing along my property line. When I asked what she was doing, she said she was documenting code violations. There are no codes to violate, I said, trying to stay calm. I'm not part of your HOA. She pursed her lips. That's not the point. No one needs this much land. It disrupts the character of the neighborhood. That's when I realized she wasn't just nosy, she was obsessed. She started sending me typed letters with the HOA's logo, which I later found out she printed herself. They accused me of everything from unapproved livestock, I had 2 goats, to visual pollution because of my rusty old tractor. I ignored most of them, but it was like tossing gasoline on a fire. Karen became relentless. She complained about the noise when I was cutting wood. She accused me of hoarding land, whatever that means, and she loved to remind me that she had influence over local enforcement. Neighbors began to whisper about her too. Apparently, I wasn't her first target. One guy down the street said she once reported a family for painting their mailbox too bright. But something about my ranch really got under her skin. Maybe it was the open space, the freedom. Maybe she just hated the idea of someone living happily outside her control. Still, I figured it would pass. I kept to myself, paid no attention to her letters, and figured she'd lose interest eventually. I was wrong. Karen didn't want peace, why she wanted power. And one day she decided she was done playing pretend HOA president. That's when things took a turn. It started like any other quiet morning on the ranch. The sun was just coming up, casting golden light across the fields, and I was out feeding the goats when I noticed something strange. 2 police cruisers slowly creeping down my long driveway. At first I thought they were lost. Maybe someone reported a stray animal or a car accident nearby. But the moment they stepped out and asked to speak with me, I knew something was off. Sir, we received a call about a land dispute. One officer said. Something about zoning violations and unauthorized use of property? I blinked. You're kidding. They weren't. According to the officers, a woman named Karen had called the non-emergency line multiple times claiming I was illegally occupying more land than is permissible under community regulations, and that my property was causing distress to HOA members. She even said she feared I was operating an unlicensed agricultural enterprise. I nearly laughed. I've got a couple goats and a vegetable garden, that's it. The officers nodded, clearly already skeptical of the complaint. Still, they said they needed to at least check things out since the caller had insisted it was a neighborhood emergency. I told them they were welcome to take a look, so I gave them a quick tour. We walked the property. I showed them the deed and county zoning map, and even pulled up my property line data on my phone. Everything was legal. Everything was clear. As we were wrapping up, we heard shouting coming from the fence line near the eastern edge of my property. It was Karen. She had apparently followed the cops in after seeing the cruisers from her window. She wasn't even trying to be subtle anymore. She was standing on the edge of my land holding a measuring tape, yelling about how no civilian should have this much land without government oversight. I'm telling you, it's a misuse of space, she shouted. He's hoarding land. That should be community green space. One of the officers tried to calm her down. "Ma'am, this man owns this property. It's properly zoned. He's not in your HOA. You have no authority here." Karen wouldn't listen. She doubled down, accusing me of manipulating the system, faking documents, and even intimidating her with rural energy. Whatever that means. Then she crossed onto my land, uninvited, and tried to unhook my goat pen to inspect livestock conditions. That was the final straw. The officers stepped in immediately, pulled her back, and informed her she was trespassing. She screamed that I should be evicted and that she was exercising her civic duty. One cop calmly responded, "Ma'am, if anyone's getting evicted today, it's you. Off this property." They gave her a formal warning, noted her for making a false report, and told her if she returned uninvited again, she could be arrested. As they walked her back toward the street, I stood there, stunned and slightly amused. Karen had tried to use the system to get rid of me, and ended up getting herself booted off my land instead. After the cops escorted Karen off my property, I figured that would be the end of it. Surely being publicly embarrassed and officially warned would be enough to make even the most stubborn HOA zealot back down. But with people like Karen, logic and consequences don't always stick. The next day, I installed security cameras along my fence line and near the gate, just in case. I wasn't about to take chances, not after she'd trespassed and tried to unhook my goats. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. Apparently a few people had seen the cruisers in my driveway and watched Karen getting scolded by the officers. Some of my neighbors who had never spoken to me before started waving as they drove by. A couple even stopped to introduce themselves and quietly say, "Sorry you had to deal with her. She's been a problem for years." One guy, Jeff, who lived 3 houses down, shared that Karen once tried to fine him for having too many wind chimes, and another woman said Karen used to walk around with a notebook, rating people's Christmas decorations. It became clear that her self-appointed HOA presidency was a long-standing joke, and I was just the latest victim. But this time, things backfired. The local HOA board, the actual board, not the imaginary one in Karen's head, sent out a letter clarifying that my property was not under their jurisdiction and that they had no authority over me or my land. It was subtle but clearly aimed at Karen. Word had gotten out that she'd used the HOA name in a fake complaint, which bordered on impersonation. She didn't just embarrass herself, she put the real HOA at risk of legal blowback. After that, Karen went quiet. Her dog walks no longer extended to the edge of my property. No more fake letters in my mailbox, no more clipboard patrols. It was like someone flipped a switch. Either she'd been humbled or she'd realized no one was taking her side anymore. I kept doing what I always did, working on the land, tending to the animals, enjoying the space I worked hard to buy. But now I had peace. Real peace. No one yelling about zoning laws that didn't exist. No one marching up my driveway waving homemade documents. A few weeks later, I hosted a casual barbecue for some neighbors. It was just burgers, some drinks, and a chance to meet people on friendlier terms. Most of the block showed up. We shared laughs, stories, and yes, a few Karen horror tales. Turns out standing up to her made me a bit of a folk hero in the neighborhood. One person joked, "You're the first one to actually evict her." I smiled. I didn't even have to. She did it to herself. And just like that, the ranch became what it was always meant to be, a quiet place to live, free from unnecessary drama, petty power trips, and one very confused HOA Karen.